Right. Good afternoon, everybody. We will start new chapter called Financial Management and Accountability Framework. So this is very important to understand the public financial management of Sri Lanka. So first we will do some revision recap about legal framework. The most important legal framework of the country is a constitution of a country, and chapter 17 of our present constitution, so 17 of the constitution of domestic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, article 148 to 154, contains broad principles on public finance. So the constitution itself explains public financial management. So it has been the chapter 17 is dedicated for that, and that 140 to 154 article numbers have covered on that. And article 148, it gives full control over public finance lies with Parliament. So constitution gives the Constitution gives full power to Parliament about the full control of public finance. So that's what we have already discussed when we study about the budgeting process. Everything, all expenditures should be approved by the Parliament. So it is according to the Constitution of the existing Constitution. And Article 149 says all government revenues flow into Consolidated Fund. So there's a fund called Consolidated Fund. All government revenue should be deposited in that fund. And warrant, the fund is all the fund deposited in Consolidated Fund. Then for expenditure, the fund should be withdrawn from the Consolidated Fund. So that will be done by the warrant. The power to issue warrant is in the hand of the Minister of Finance. The warrant under the hand of the Minister of Finance is to be issued for any withdrawal from Consolidated Fund. Right? So withdraw the money, the Minister of Finance should issue the warrant. So he will issue the warrant according to the approved budget in the Parliament. And the Parliament may by law create a Contingencies Fund for the purpose of providing urgent and unforeseen expenditure. So in addition to the Consolidated Fund, sometimes a country may face unforeseen expenditures. For example, a disaster, flood, tsunami, right? So this kind of instances, the government need fund. So this fund is created by the Parliament. So this fund will be used in the time of urgency. And 152 says no bill, so it's been no act, no bill or motion affecting revenue shall be introduced in Parliament except by Minister with the approval of the Cabinet. There are something, any revenues, any act, any amendments or any proposals that affect the government revenue cannot be accepted, it cannot be introduced in the Parliament except by the Minister of Finance to the Cabinet. For example, to change the VAT or to change the income tax rate. So this kind of amendments or this kind of proposals, New Inland Revenue Act, whatever the things, should be submitted by the Minister of Finance with the approval of the Cabinet. Without the approval of the Cabinet, the Parliament cannot be accept that. The Speaker of the Parliament may not taken into consideration to discuss in the Parliament. And appointment of Auditor General by the President, subject to approval of the Constitutional Council. Auditor General, it's a public fund. The expenditure of public fund is monitored, audited by the Auditor General. He should be a independent person. Therefore, the appointment of Auditor General is done by the President, Excellency President of the country, but he should take approval from Constitutional Council. And 153 A to H. The Constitution of the Audit Service Commission. Constitution of Audit Service Commission vested with the powers of appointment, promotion, transfer, disciplinary control, and dismissal of the members belonging to Sri Lanka State Audit Service. Many public fund fraud and activities are investigated by the officers from the Audit Service Commission. Therefore, the members of Audit Service Commission's appointment, promotion, transfer, disciplinary actions, all the things are not in the hand of the minister or any other politicians. So these things, these transfer or whatever the HR related things, the actions should be taken by Sri Lanka State Audit Service Sri Lanka. Right, it belongs to Audit Service Commission. So duties and functions of Auditor General and report to the Parliament within 10 months. Now Auditor General take necessary actions and they have to report to the Parliament within 10 months immediate after fiscal year of the end of the fiscal year. So that is defined in 154. This is the overall view about public finance stated in the Constitution of our country. Now we move to our section, the chapter, the framework. First, the introduction. So it is important for public sector manager. And officers entrusted with financial and accounting responsibilities to understand the operational framework within which public financial management and accountability are implemented and achieved. Who are the public sector managers? Can you tell some officers? Could you please tell me who are the public sector managers? Anybody else? Who are the public sector managers? All officers who are dealing with financial matters in the public sector organizations are called public sector managers, especially head of the department, head of the institutions, and the secretary to the ministers, right? All of them should understand. So what's their role, what are the duties, what are the functions and responsibilities, to whom they have to report, about what they have to investigate. So all the things they have to understand, and most importantly, they have to understand the organizational hierarchy, to whom they have to report, right? So it is important for public sector managers, especially accountants and officers, the paying officer and certifying officer, subject clerks, entrusted with financial and accounting responsibilities, right? To understand the operational framework within which the public financial management and accountabilities are implemented and achieved. So this includes inter alia various authorities involved and their power and responsibilities and how they delegate their responsibilities to. So this framework, the framework outline what are the authorities and what are their powers, what are their responsibilities, and how they can delegate their responsibilities to the other officers. So all the things are outlined in the framework. So financial regulation of government of Sri Lanka lays regulation and guidelines on this aspect. Have you heard about financial regulation? Anybody else? Financial regulation? Have you seen financial regulation? So financial regulation of government of Sri Lanka, right? This is published in 1992. So it has 344 pages. And here FR, simply we call it FR. So it's about here we are focusing on this financial management and accountability. This is what we are discussing. So everything is about the financial matters. Here estimation of expenditure and revenue. The budgeting process. We have to calculate. We have to aggregate government expenditure and government revenue, and authorities for expenditure, refund, write-offs, financial matter, and again financial management and accountability. That's what we are discussing in the chapter. And receipt payment of money. So receipt of money, right? And payment of expenditure, right? So these are the things included in the financial regulations. So this is the Bible of accountants, not only accountants, for financial managers, public financial managers in the public sector organizations. So financial regulation of government of Sri Lanka lays regulation and guidelines on this aspect. So financial regulation, FR, financial regulation is issued under the hands of Ministry of Finance. So who has published the financial regulation? Who has published? Who has issued this one? Who has issued? Anybody? Com 17. Who was issued the FR, financial regulation? Com 17, are you there? Unmute your mic. Com 38. Com 38, are you there? Com 38. Com 27. Why you are being silent? Financial regulation is issued under the hand of Minister of Finance. So the FR, financial regulation, provides regulatory frameworks within which the government financial transactions are carried out. So financial regulation intended to ensure orderly financial transaction in public sector institutions. In public sector companies, not public sector companies, business oriented companies, they prepare the financial statement based on the Sri Lankan accounting standards and Sri Lanka financial reporting standard. Unlike companies, public sector organizations are non-profit organizations. So the main objective is to provide good services to the general public. So therefore, the profit motive cannot be exist there. So financial regulation intends to ensure orderly financial transactions in public sector institutions. So you couldn't find the profit loss account, you couldn't find statement of performance like that. So the present financial regulation, it was published in 1992, supersede the 1967 version financial regulation. So earlier version of financial regulation was 1966. the latest version of financial regulation, it was published in 1992. So after publishing the new version, the earlier version has been abandoned. Financial regulations are binding on ministries, departments, statutory bodies, and all state employees. All public sector organizations. In case it may be, it is maybe in the ministry, it may be in the department, it may be the corporation, or whatever the things. Even the head of the institution to the laborer, the clerk, accountant, everybody should bind under the financial regulations. So even if they want to spend 1 rupees, or if they want to earn 1 rupees from public fund, they have to, all the things should be followed based on the financial regulation. In the case of government corporations mean what? Excuse me, sir. Say Sagala. Okay, bye. Right. In case of government corporation like Sri Lanka Petroleum Corporation, Rubabani Corporation, companies, Sri Lanka Telecom, Sri Lankan Airlines. So all the government corporations. So this financial regulation will be applied unless they have adopted their own. Some government corporations like Sri Lanka Telecom, Sri Lankan Airlines, they have their own financial regulations. They have adapted, they have some modification based on the requirement of their operations, right? Based on this FR 1992, they have adapted, they have modified based on their requirement. So if there are no such kind of adopted financial regulation, they have to follow the financial regulation 1992. So in case of government corporations, so these financial regulation will apply, right? These financial regulations apply unless they have adapted their own comprehensive financial regulations, rules and procedures. Financial regulations, it's a general scope. Financial regulations mainly deals with regulations on the following aspects. Here everything here they listed. Everything are related to financial matters. It is not about the transfer of employees, promotion of employees, leave, right? Leave, promotion. No, it is not discussed about HR matters. It guides about the financial matters, financial management. So for HR, how provide appointment, how provide promotions, termination, transfer, disciplinary actions. So these HR related things handled by establishment code. Establishment code you can download from the website. So that's deal with HR related issues, but financial related issues are deal by the financial regulations. Here these scopes, estimate of expenditure and revenue, authorities and expenditure, refund and write-off, financial management and accountability, receipt and payment, custody of public money, interest and bank account, accounting and books of account, advance account, kachari account, courts account, foreign aid, printing and publication, supplies, works, services, miscellaneous. Here you can find these are the contents, right? These are the contents: estimate of expenditure, authorities for expenditure, refund, here receive payment, right? That is the scope of financial regulation. However, our focus mainly finance management and accountability, and also we look at receipt of income, government revenue and payment. Also we have to discuss here. First we look at the finance management and accountability. This one, finance management and accountability. So financial regulation here we have to discuss 124, 25, 26, 27, 28, 31. So we look at FR 124. Yes. Chapter 3. Financial management and accountability. And then here FR, financial regulation 124.1. So it's tell about supervision of financial matters. And FR 125, it's accounting officers and revenue accounting officers. And 126, treasury supervision and control. 127 is about general responsibility of chief accounting officer. 128, general responsibilities of accounting officer. 131, executive function of treasury department, financial, like that. Right, so the related FRs are 124, 25, 26, 27, 28 and 131. So we look at one by one. So chapter 3, financial management and accountability. So financial regulation 124, part 1. The Minister of Finance is to lay down the broad framework within which departmental financial transactions of all kinds may be undertaken. Now, all the financial transactions in public sector organizations are coming under the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance lay down the framework within which departmental financial transaction of all kind may be undertaken. So, what does it mean? How to pay salary? Right, under the Ministry of Finance, all the departments, all the ministries, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Agriculture, everything's financial matters are everything coming from Ministry of Finance. Minister of Finance, he will allocate fund to each ministries. Ministry of Education. Under each ministry there are several departments. For example, universities and Department of Examination and national schools and education publication department. So there are departments. Under that department there are many small divisions. Even in a small division, for example, in a school that's a clerk, the labor. So they have to pay salary and how much increment and what is the retirement age, what is the overtime, and what is the advance payment, vouchers. So everything in each and every department, each and every ministries, in all the levels, the financial transactions. So he should lay down, he should instruct. The Minister of Finance should instruct all the financial matters in all departments, not only in the Ministry of Finance, not only in his ministry. He should lay down. He should provide guidelines to manage the public fund, even single rupees. So Minister of Finance is to lay down the broad framework within which the departmental financial transaction of all kind may be undertaken. So Minister of Finance is responsible to implement effective financial management system in public sector organizations. So that is 24.1 and 124 part 2. Here Minister of Finance is to appoint secretary to the ministry to the chief accounting officer. His ministry and delegates to him. Minister of Finance is to appoint the secretary to the ministry to be a chief accounting officer of his ministry and delegates to him as a chief accounting officer and responsibility for supervising departmental financial transaction subject to deduction of the treasury. Right. For the easy understanding, we take hierarchy, organizational hierarchy, organizational structure of ministry. So what are the things? That I will explain my own example. So let's take the university system. For example, university, Ministry of Education is coming under Ministry of Education. Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Education, there are a lot of departments. Here, university. Yes. For that. Here, Excellency President of Sri Lanka, and under that the Parliament, Cabinet, under Cabinet and ministries. There are ministries. So Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Health. We take Ministry of Education. Ministry of Education. And the Ministry of Education, there are so many departments. Here, Higher Education Division, right? Universities directly coming under the Ministry of Education. And here, Ministry of NIE, National Institute of Education, and Department of Examination, Department of Education Publication. So there are departments, right? Here we can find Ministry of Finance. He is responsible for public finance, the company, right? The Constitution says, current Constitution, FR 124 says the overall financial management is coming under Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance. So he should lay down about all the financial transactions, how make all the financial transactions, all financial dealings, how to handle, the instruction clearly given by the Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance will instruct all the ministries under the cabinet, right? And so each ministry has its own secretary to the ministry, right? So Ministry of Finance, it is impossible to supervise all the ministries, all the departments, all the officers under the public sector organization in Sri Lanka. Therefore, Ministry of Finance delegates some of the functions to other ministries. Here, Ministry of Education. When in the Ministry of Education, you can find a secretary, right? Secretary to the Ministry of Education. Secretary. He appointed. Minister of Finance will appoint the secretary to the Ministry of Finance, so Ministry of Education, as a chief accounting officer. Chief accounting officer. Right. Chief accounting officer. You know that under the Ministry of Education there are several departments. Here universities, Ministry of National Institute of Education, Department of Examination, Department of Education Publication. So there are several departments. So here Ministry of Finance appoint secretary to the Ministry of Education as a chief accounting officer. So therefore the chief secretary should look after, control all the financial transactions in each department, all department under his ministry. So it is also very difficult task to the secretary to the Minister of Education. Therefore, he delegates his authority, his responsibilities to the head of the departments, head of the institution. For example, there will be a head to the Department of Education. So the head of the Department of Education will be appointed as a accounting officer. Here, all financial affairs in the department will be reported by the head of the department to the secretary. Here, the head of the department will function as an accounting officer, and he will report to the secretary to the Ministry of Education as a the secretary of Ministry of Education will function as a chief accounting officer, and finally the chief accounting officer will report to the Ministry of Finance. Is it clear? If you are clear only, we can move the next slide. If you not understand, you can't understand anything hereafter. Is it clear? Any doubt? 20 marks question will be there definitely. If you are not understand this thing, you are unable to pass. You are unable to score 20. Is it clear? Is it clear? Are you there? How many of you? 31, 30 students are there? Nobody is responding. Then how can we make an effective teaching? No one is open the mouth. Are you there? Anybody else? Are you online?
Yes, sir.
Good. Please respond. Otherwise, it's how can I determine whether is it effective or not? So it's a waste of time, no? Right. Right. So the final conclusion is each ministry has its own secretaries. Each secretaries will function as a chief accounting officer, and each ministries have its own departments. So department head of the department will function as a accounting officer. This is the conclusion. Accounting officer will report to the chief accounting officer. Chief accounting officer will report to the Ministry of Finance. Is that clear? Is it clear?
Yes.
Right. Good. So 124 FR says the Ministry of Finance is to appoint the secretary to the ministry. This is very important. Secretary to the ministry to be the chief accounting officer of his ministry, and delegates to him, the finance manager, the Minister of Finance. Minister of Finance will delegate his function to chief accounting officer, because the Minister of Finance will appoint chief accounting officer. The responsibility for supervising department. Each ministry has its own departments. So supervising departmental financial transactions, subject to direction of the treasury. Right? Right. Now we'll see accounting officer and revenue accounting officer. Who is accounting officer? Head of each department. Who is chief accounting officer? Who is chief accounting officer? Secretary to the minister. Here, except where other arrangements are made by the treasury, normally the head of the department will be the accounting officer in respect of all financial transactions of his department. Not accountant, right? You may find there are positions called accountant, chief accountant, and so there are so many posts is coming under Sri Lanka Accounting Service. So those accountants are not accounting officers. Those are accountants, right? They are not accounting officers. Actually, head of the department will be the accounting officer, right? As such, he is immediately responsible to chief accounting officer. In the manner laid down in the financial regulation. Each secretary to the ministry shall, in addition to his being a chief accounting officer of his ministry and the department under the ministry, be the accounting officer for the department of the ministry. Ministry, in each ministry there are a lot of departments. For all departments, he will be function as a chief accounting officer, because all the head of the departments will report to secretary to the ministry. At the same time, there are some income, there are some expenditures in the ministry itself. In such instances, who is accounting officer for the ministry? For example, Ministry of Education, what place? Or Ministry of Health. Who is the accounting officer for that office, for that ministry? This means sometimes the chief accounting officer should work as accounting officer. He has two roles. One role is chief accounting officer for his ministry. Means all the department heads. And he should work as accounting officer to his office. So he has clerk, he has management assistant in the ministry. Okay. Each secretary of the ministry shall, in addition to being chief accounting officer of the ministry and the department under the ministry, right, be the accounting officer for the department of the ministry office. Any questions? Very important, right? Many people make mistake the last time. Any questions? If you have any doubt, please clear now itself. Otherwise, you can't understand the rest of the things. Any questions? Any questions? Right. So revenue accounting officer, revenue. Sometime some departments, some ministries earning revenues, collecting income. For example, Ministry of Ports and National Water Board, Drainage Board, and CEB, and Department of Motor Traffics. Right. So there are departments which are earning income. The treasury will indicate from time to time the officers who will be responsible for the preparation of estimates of revenues under the different heads, subheads, items and sub-items, and who will ultimately be accountable for variation between estimates and actual collections. So where you have you studied? Where you have studied heads, subheads, items? Have you heard about these words earlier? Have you heard about these words? In budgeting, we have discussed budgeting, Yes or no? We have discussed budgeting. Am I right? Did we discuss this? Budgeting? No one responding. Did we study budget? Public budget? People are being silent. In the budget, in the budget process, there are two sides, income, revenue, and expenditures. Revenue and expenditures. So the expenditure, there are the program, project, and the category, category, and the head, and subhead items, like that. It has been categorized. Same way, revenue also categorized. So expenditure for each office, each department's expenditure will be aggregated at the ministry level, right, and will be submitted in the parliament. It be included in the national budget. Likewise, the revenue side, each department, not all, there are some departments, they generate income, they generate revenue. So all departments revenue under the particular ministry will be aggregated under the ministry, and the ministry revenue will be aggregated in the public budget. So this is what we have already discussed. So when the initial stage, at the initial stage of preparing national budget, the Minister of Finance should show the estimates of revenues and estimate of expenditure. And the accounting officer, normally he works in accounting officer, in the purpose of estimating the government revenue in a particular department, the officer will be appointed as a revenue accounting officer. The accounting officer will be appointed as a revenue accounting officer for the purpose of estimating the revenue. The treasury will indicate from time to time, they will instruct time to time on behalf of the Minister of Finance, the officer who will be responsible for the preparation of estimate of revenues under different heads, subheads, items, sub-items, and who will ultimately be accountable for variation, between the estimates and actual collections. Sometimes he may estimate 100 million income, but actually 70 million or 60 million or so. So there's a variation. In the variations, for this variation, the revenue accounting officer is responsible. Such officers shall, for the purpose of this regulation, be referred as a revenue accounting officer. So for the purpose of estimating revenue, an officer will be appointed by the treasury, so he will be called as revenue accounting officer. The function of accounting officer and revenue accounting officer are indicated in FR 128. Now let's see the treasury supervision and control. Treasury, under the Ministry of Finance, the treasury is very important department. Treasury is very important department. The treasury will allocate the fund to the ministries and departments and collect money. The Consolidated Fund is in the hand of the treasury. All the money in the treasury, right? All the government money in the treasury. So treasury will supervise all the financial transactions, financial matters in public sector organizations as whole in the island on behalf of the Minister of Finance. The chief function of the treasury is to maintain, control and supervision over government finance, right? Even though the Minister of Finance is responsible for the public finance, on behalf of the ministry, on behalf of the minister, the treasury will undertake that function. So it is therefore the duty of the treasury to set up a system of financial administration that is satisfactory in all respects. Especially with regard to accounting, security and responsibility. This it does in the two ways. So what do you mean by this? The treasury undertake the responsibility of the Minister of Finance. So therefore the treasury should implement a good financial administrative system across all the government offices, all the government departments, all the government ministries. So how they supervise, how they control the financial management. So it has two options. First, by regulations, directives and instructions that are generally acceptable, right? So when you visit the Ministry of Finance website, you can find a Ministry of Finance. Minister of Finance, you see that is treasury, right? Minister of Finance, treasury. You can find here Ministry of State Administration Departments, treasury. You can find circulars here, FR manuals. This is financial regulation of the government. You can download, and books, circulars. Here circulars. Right. Here time to time they are issuing circulars. So this is how the in stock. Here when you look, for example, we collect this one, we download the circular. So to whom they address? Here to whom he address? All secretaries of ministries and head of the departments and district secretaries. Here all the secretaries mean the all chief accounting officers. Head of the department means accounting officers. All. Here all. Right. So he supervises. Time to time it gives instruction to the ministry secretaries. It means the chief accounting officers and head of the department. It means accounting officers. So how? By regulations, directives and instructions that are generally applicable. That's the number one. This is the common method of monitoring, controlling the activities of financial management system. Second way is by instructing or advising chief accounting officers and accounting officers of any special measures necessary in particular circumstances. Here the website, you can find the circulars in the website which are common for all ministries, all the secretaries, all the ministries and all the departments, and some instructions, some guidelines, some directives are specifically for a particular department or ministry. For example, salary increment for doctors. Salary increment for doctors. So you can't find that kind of circulars in the ministry website. Right? They will send letter directly to the secretary to the Ministry of Health, not to other ministries. So that is specifically that instruction, that directive specifically to the Ministry of Health. So by instructing, advising chief accounting officer and accounting officers of any special measures necessary in a particular circumstance. So these are the two common methods. The controlling and supervisory function of the treasury. Right. How the treasury, how the Ministry of Finance undertake, control and supervise the financial management function. First, how it performs. First, to provide for the appointment of chief accounting officer and accounting officer, and to determine the duties and responsibilities. Even though the secretary is appointed by the ministry, secretaries are appointed by the president secretary, but the title called secretary, the chief accounting officer, the appointment letter is issued by chief accounting officer. Is appointment letter as chief accounting officer, and accounting officer is given by secretary to the ministry. It means treasury. So therefore they control them by appointing chief accounting officers and accounting officers. Number two, communicate and interpret all financial directions of the Ministry of Finance to all accounting officers and accounting officers. So time to time the Ministry of Finance publish circulars. There are some sort of misconceptions, misunderstandings. So these kind of misunderstandings will be clarified by Ministry of Education, Ministry of Finance, especially the Treasury. For example, new Inland Revenue Act has come to the implement. But many officers, many income tax officers, many income tax commissioners have a serious doubt on that. then they have clarified these things from the treasury. And some issues, the accounting officer or chief accounting officer have a serious doubt on that, then doubt on a particular uh, gazette notification or particular circular, then they can communicate Ministry of Finance, Treasury, then they will detect them. And also maintain the overall departmental cadres, scale of salaries, rate of wages, etc. So the doctors, the medical doctors, medical officers working under the hospitals, working under the Ministry of Health, the salary scale, the number of vacancies, the cadre, and the overtime, the overtimes, everything's coming under the hand of treasury, right? Even to increase 1 rupees as a salary, additional salary increase, they have to take approval from the treasury. Even in the hospital, even in the library, or even in the university, to appoint a laborer or to appoint management assistant, to appoint a lecturer, they have to take approval from the treasury, right? And to satisfy itself that revenues and other monies dues to the government, all the revenues and receivable to the governments, including the commercial activities and deposits, are properly collected and brought account by the government departments. Some government departments collect revenues, collect income. So the treasury should ensure that all collected money, all the money belongs to the government, should deposit it to the treasury, Consolidated Fund. And to satisfy itself that financial regulations are complied by the government departments. As I told you earlier, the financial regulation is the Bible for financial transactions in the public sector organizations. So the deviation from the financial regulation is a serious offense. So therefore the treasury streamline all their financial transaction in public sector organization by ensuring that the departments, the government officers, are strictly following financial regulations. To exercise supervision over the Consolidated Fund and other government funds, accounts, as well as over monies held in deposit, excess Consolidated Fund. So exercise supervision over the Consolidated Fund and government fund account, as well as over monies in hand. So all the public government fund under the custody of under the supervision of the treasury. Now the next part is 127 FR 127